thanks everybody for coming. This is a super unofficial but community-based event where we're gonna get everybody to talk face-to-face each other. And I highly encourage you to speak up and start discussion, because this is what it's for. This is not a one-way communication, like a discussion where I'm hoping it to be. And that is all I want to talk about for housekeeping. And Alejandro Escobar, he is our expert of this month, and he is going to he works in Redpanda in the Kubernetes team, so that's why I think it's awesome to actually invite him to share his experience on what he's working on and whatever he wants to talk about. This is community, remember. So yeah, Alejandro, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. I'll give you a bit of my background. There might be some confusion as well online because my first name is actually Jesus, but I do go by Alejandro, so there might be some LinkedIn confusion there. I apologize for that, but I go by my first name on very serious kind of things, and usually I prefer to go by Alejandro, just so everyone knows. Again, thank you for the introduction, Christina. So a few things, just so everyone knows, I'm still fairly a good Redpanda newbie for the most part. I started about a few months ago now, in the beginning of January. So I have experienced a lot of the pain points, of deploying the application in Kubernetes, and so I'm totally empathetic to a lot of these pain points, and so I'm hoping to kind of discuss that with you, kind of giving you a fresh kind of set of eyes from my perspective. So let me get in a little bit with the background. First of all, I'm not the tech lead of the Kubernetes team. That title goes to Joe. And then Rafael has a lot of experience. He has done a lot of work with the operator, and we'll discuss a little bit of the operator a little later on. So these are the guys, like, the big guys, the smart, awesome guys in the Kubernetes channel that you probably have discussed or talked to at some point if you've been in the community chat. And I totally encourage you guys, talk to the community chat. There you will find them as well, and you'll find me as well, and I'll answer your questions as best of my knowledge. So it's not my team. I'm part of the team. I'm the newest, member in the block, and I've definitely been seeing what you guys have been seeing, which is like a lot of growth on the Helm chart. So that's like the big thing that I want to kind of discuss right now. So before we've had we kind of added this chart. There was actually a contribution from the community. For the last 6 months, Joe and Rafael have been kind of working, getting that up to speed, getting into like this level where we feel very comfortable with people deploying it. And let me pause for a moment here. I just want to remind you guys that this is like, free for all. Please feel free to contribute and talk, and give me your feedback as well. If there's anything specific you want to go into a little more in depth, let me know. I definitely want this to be more of a chat, not just me talking for like 30 minutes or so. So as I was saying, we've been Joe and Rafael have been working real hard for the last 6 months, kind of getting this up to speed, kind of getting it into the level where we feel it will be production ready. And in fact, just as as joined in, we were kind of getting to that point, and we feel now with 3.0 coming out of the chart version, I think some of you will notice that we've definitely set some very hard defaults for like TLS, etc. And that's because we feel that these are kind of like production level values, and we want to stick to that. So that's kind of our goal. We definitely want this chart to be that someone can apply and deploy within around 1 minute or so. So that's kind of like our goal. And we want this chart to not only just come up with Redpandas, but come up with what we would consider to be a production-ready Redpanda. And that comes with a lot of opinions, and that this is our opinion approach. But as you've noticed, there are a lot of dials, there are a lot of things you can change, and it is up to you how you want to configure Redpandas. We are also thinking about being cloud first, so we definitely want this to be an experience where you can deploy this on basically any cloud provider. And in fact, if you look at our documentation, which I totally encourage everyone to look at, we do have a lot of documentation with GKE, with EKS, etc. And I think recently we've added some more kind of support for Azure as well. So this has been like a kind of a huge task for us for the last, for the team for the last 6 months or so. For myself, for the last 3 or 4 months, getting us to this level. We've worked really hard. We've tried to answer a lot of different questions regarding that. regarding these changes. And we'll have some trip ups. Like for example, just to be very what do you call it, transparent, we changed one of the values files recently, so we considered that somewhat of a security risk, and this was not a big deal, but well, it's a big deal, but it is a small thing that we changed, which we were not happy about, and so we went back and removed some of those old Helm releases that included that change, and that was setting the TLS from basically being enabled by default to disabled. And this is something that we're still working out how to communicate that to our customers, like saying, hey, look, we made this goof. This is how you fix it. This is what we did to kind of remediate it. But just so you know that we do care, and we do care about what community thinks. And so this is me being transparent and telling you, like, hey, look, we're not perfect. We will make mistakes in the future. But we definitely take action whenever we make this kind of mistake. So I thought that was kind of a good example of us doing that.
I love that because, I think it's best to come from the community and just give us feedback right away so we can get it all fixed in the product. And this is like the most direct way, rather than shipping and everything as a product and then finding out things last minute and trying to scramble it. Everything that you do in community will help us and contribute back with us. And, I think it's a very healthy way of interacting. So kind of just want to say that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate that. So that's kind of where we are. We've definitely worked pretty hard on the Helm chart. We hope to continue that work, and there are offshoots of that. So let me take a step back to some more of the history behind all this work we've done so far. So one thing we did have available, I think we were telling customers to kind of use, would be the operator, the Red-Panda operator. We moved away from that operator, and we were encouraging individuals to use the chart. So we definitely encourage it. And one major reason for that is because we are going to use a chart as part of a new version of the operator. And that will help us kind of avoid having two different ways to do the same thing. It'll help customers kind of understand how their deployment works, both on the operator level, if they want to use an operator. Turns out that it is something that's very heavily used. So it is something we are considering very carefully when we're doing this transition. But if you have experience with a Helm chart, you will know what to expect from the operator. So that's kind of the main reason why we're moving in that direction. And there's a lot of pluses to that. As we'll hope in the future you will see that. We are working very hard. So that's kind of like a view or perspective of what is to come. And so we're kind of excited about that. We definitely are looking forward to making those changes to make it easier to use and have this understanding that if you know the Helm chart, you will know how to use the operator. So I think that's kind of exciting work that's coming up.
Yeah, and kind of just out of curiosity of the audiences here, like, do you use Helm chart more than operators, or can you kind of like the combination of both? Like, what would you prefer?
So, man, that touches up on a very specific.
No, I was just asking the audience, like, what's your opinion on it? Like, anybody from the audience and anybody's participating.
Okay. Yeah. Let's hear some.
I want to hear you. Like, what's your thought on the two things? Like combining it, I think it's a great idea because then yes, Joe had some comments here.
Joe, you want?
Yes, easier for non-Go developers to customize and contribute to. Definitely, I think it's a lot easier because the way that it described how I want everything to deploy, and I can easily configure that through a value. It's a lot more easier, like from my perspective, to kind of see what's going on with my cluster. So definitely. Right.
Agreed. Anyone else want to join in?
Man, anecdotally, I can also say that since we did make that switch to the Helm chart, we've had a lot more contributions from the community.
Thank you, Joe. That's actually a very good point. Yes. Yeah, and in fact, let me expound on a little bit. That we want contributions. I think those are great from the community. We totally want to encourage that. Whenever you contribute, we do want you to sign the SLA. That's one thing that we see kind of a hang up with some customers, but we definitely need that. With that said, once you do that, we're more than happy to answer your questions, to kind of guide you to the end. So it is work on our part, but it's community work, and that is something that we see as something worthwhile, something that we need to do as kind of maintainers. So we are more than happy to help out any contribution. You have an idea, you think something will make our product better, that you require, please contribute away. I mean, seriously, just add the code in, let us know what you're doing, and we'll help out, kind of get it to the goalpost there. So it's something very important to us. I mean, every day, every morning, this first thing I do, to look at the Helm Chart repository, look at the issues, look at the contributions. Anyone needs help with something, I'll definitely, you'll be seeing me there. And that's true for Joe, and that's true for Rafael as well. So, please contribute. Let us know what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong, and we want to see more names in our repository. So, yeah, encourage.
All right. Yeah. So since we have a few people here, is there anything that you wanna? Since this is also an Ask Me Anything session as well, but it's more like a discussion and Ask Me Anything. Does anybody have any problems or questions they want to raise and kind of want to ask Alejandro about it?
No, it works perfectly, apparently. Everything.
Okay, I guess so. So then I'm expecting everybody will deploy their Redpanda.
There is a question about the testing for Helm. We use chart testing for the most part to do testing. Every PR gets tested in this fashion. We like I was mentioning yesterday, we did notice a kind of like a blind what's the word expression here? We had some blinders towards changes in the values file. So after recognizing that little blunder, we decided to kind of make another check for that value file changes as well, and it needs to be an overridable check. So Joe contributed that. That was awesome how quickly he reacted to that, and that will prevent from further future those type of errors in the future from happening again. So right now we're doing we're doing Helm chart testing. That is the tool that we use to test this. We do upgrade tests. So we do installation tests, we do upgrade tests. We also make changes to value files. So we have several tests just to changing what the values are to make sure that those are correct and then they deploy correctly. Right now our tests unfortunately are taking more than an hour to run. So that's something we're going to work on. But it is required. We do have this as a necessity, and we will be adding further tests in the very near future, because there are some blind spots in our testing that we need to cover. If that makes sense. Does that answer your question, Travis? Awesome. Okay.
Right. In that case, I have a question. I think this is mostly coming from talking to people on Slack, or talking to people that I engage with daily. These are the people that deploys their Redpanda cluster on top of Kubernetes, and something went wrong. And I think my general question for you is what is your how do you find out what the problem is? How do you troubleshoot? What are the most common steps that you take? Say, you see a broker that's kind of not responding, or it's not spinning up, or whatever. What would be the first thing you do, and how do you get started? And how do you kind of get started on digging up what the questions are? How do you what is your thought path? Like, how do you find things?
There's a few steps you can take to first diagnose the problem. I mean, the first direct approach is using kubectl describe that pod. So you give it the pod name. Make sure you use the right namespace to point to it. Because we're using stateful sets, the names of the pods are deterministic. So you can kind of use that knowledge to kind of figure out which pod you want to look at it and not forget it. So that's one of the first things. You want to look at the events there. And the other thing you can do, if it's a little bit odd and you don't understand really what you're looking there, you can do two other things. It's use kubectl get events, so you can see what the state of things were as they were transitioning. So you can see how things were deployed, how they were added. Maybe there's a storage class issue, and you'll get some of those errors as well from the inventing. Maybe you forgot a secret, or there's a secret you were supposed to add and you forgot to add. Those kind of things will come up from those kind of event logs. And then ultimately, you would really want to look at if you ended up in a crash loop, for example, you may want to take a look at the logs from Redpanda. So kubectl, kubectl log. I keep saying kubectl logs, -f on the pod name, and then you'll see some logs coming up from that. And that's true even if it crashed. You'll see the last things it kind of mentioned before it crashed. That's a little time sensitive, so you do have to kind of get to it really quick. So those are kind of the first approaches you want to take. You might want to also look at your values file if you're doing a Helm deployment. You might also want to look at the Helm logs. You might want to run Helm with a --debug, to see if there was an issue with the Helm deployment itself. So there's definitely some tools available in that level, in that set, where you're talking about chart deployments, where you can kind of help you figure out where the chart went wrong, if that seems to be the problem.
That's really good.
Mhm.
I think that's pretty good, very comprehensive. Yeah. Anyone that has their own trick on the troubleshooting part, like what do you do normally other than what Alejandro just kind of discussed? Any thoughts?
You can also hit the community chat, right, and kind of give us your problems and troubles.
Right.
I'm happy to look at it.
Well, one of the problem is like people don't give you enough information in the community. They kind of just describe what they have, and it's really hard to guess what the problems are. So it'd be easier if you.
The conversation is the beginning part. Sometimes, getting the pain points and seeing how customers view the problem or understand the problem kind of helps us guide how to better the product. Because if we have, for example, if we could have had a warning in the Helm chart saying, hey, look, this value file may not get you what you want. If we could have provided that warning first before the customer deployed or tried to deploy the chart to avoid that problem they saw, that would be great. That's a win, right? Because immediately they will know, oh, shoot, I got that warning, that maybe I should have done that. Anything that can help the customer experience will come definitely from those conversations and from their pain points of debugging as well and triaging their own problems. So I always see it as a positive. Like if there is clearly something they're not communicating and we know they're not communicating that, we ask for it, maybe we should have a tool, or maybe we should have a procedure for like documenting the problems and how to communicate that and things to expect whenever we're triaging, etc. I think that those kind of things are really good. Come out of those conversations.
That is good to know. So Travis has comment. One of the hard thing for me as newish to Kubernetes was wondering where every possibility log fogs. Yes, it's exactly the thing that I was pointing was a tool called Stern to help tell things. Okay, I think that's good.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah.
K9, I think there's another one that you could use, but it's more like an advanced type of tool. Stern, interesting. I never used that one.
Yeah, me too. I never used it. Maybe I'll try it next time.
We should copy these and start testing these out. So, awesome.
Maybe we should have a cluster ready next time.
You guys are already improving my output here. So awesome.
Pro tips from Joe. He says the Kali can tell the logs by label. Okay, by namespace. Okay.
Tail. It's like tail, but for
tail.
Right.
Before podders. It's pretty good to know, because normally I would just go and see look all the log like on its own through each pod. So having that together would be great.
Cool. The thing I like about Kale is you can start it before you actually do your install, and as the pods are created, it'll immediately start tailing them.
Yeah. Does it pick up any events as well? Like because when you create it, okay.
Kale's just for tailing logs.
Gotcha.
But I mean, as far as watching events, your kubectl will get events -w will watch.
Right. That's good. I'll probably have to. So the best case scenario, let me print it out. So I'll have a terminal that's doing kubectl looking at the events and Kale looking at all the pods, so I can have a nice overview of how things are doing, and then also looking at the error log of Helm chart and kind of see how it's installing, if it's giving any errors. And that kind of just covers me for most of the part. And maybe with Sterns, right? Like looking at things. I'm not sure like how Stern works for now. Like I have not used it, so it would be good to know like what information it's providing, right?
I think it works in the same way that Kale does. So I think it's just another tool that's out there in the Kubernetes community.
Ah, gotcha. Okay. So we can kind of do both and see which one works better for you then. Perfect. I like that. Yeah, any other questions or any discussion you want to bring up? This is a great time.
I think one of the things I'm curious about is, so just to be clear, I'm a new person at Redpanda. I've only been here a couple months, so and I'm still learning Kubernetes in general. One of the things that I've been working on recently is understanding how to deploy Redpanda in an air-gapped Kubernetes environment. And I'm actually working on a blog for that for Redpanda itself.
Oh,
Kind
wow.
of curious how other people use Redpanda in sort of these disconnected Kubernetes environments where they may not have internet access, right? And sort of what things you may have run across in trying to deploy Redpanda in those environments.
So the major thing with air-gapped environments is getting that Helm the repositories, or not Helm, the repositories and the Docker repositories available, right? And then seeding those. Is that something that you're recommending, or how are you recommending that?
So there's two ways that we've been thinking about this when trying to kind of work through this process, right? It's either you are pulling the containers directly into a private repository, or you have some sort of proxy mechanism available to do that, or some sort of proxy cache. The testing that I've been doing, so I've been basing all this on using Rancher and RKE2 in an air-gapped environment, and we built a kind of a Docker proxy that cached the containers as they pulled through. So it's just kind of figuring out how to wire that up and understand that stuff. So I don't know if that answers your question, Alejandro.
Kind of, yeah. It's a complex problem. One approach would be so what you say is totally legit. It's exactly right. But one question that keeps coming up whenever we do air-gapped environment is like, what version of things you're going to download, what version of things you need. And that's a big one, right? Because we have to decide, like, if this is Redpanda version 3, Helm Chart looks at, let's say, version 3.03, right? Doesn't exist anymore, by the way. But it's suppose that is what you want. Then you'd have to know what versions of Redpanda what image you're gonna download, and then from then what image of the rest of the requirements, right? Server manager you're gonna download as well. So what I found useful for these kind of things is having a very opinionated approach of what it means to download version 3.03 and to install it in an air-gapped environment. So you kind of have to get a list and compile that list somehow. Probably some automated process to do so, and then download all those and then tar it into a single package that customers can then use to seed their Docker containers. And that's kind of like the safe way of doing it, because if you don't, then you could end up having like a very kind of what's it, Frankenstein kind of deployment, or the deployment won't work at all, right? Because you're missing packages and you have to compile that list as you go, figure out what packages you're missing, etc.
Can we just recommend the customer to have their own container registry somewhere within?
Oh yeah, no, for sure. We would definitely recommend. I would say we recommend that, but we would have to supply the tarball for all the images they need to have, so they can deploy the Redpanda and have that successful deployment.
Yeah, and I think it also depends, right? When we talk about air-gapped, like is it like fully air-gapped where like there is absolutely no internet connection, or is it air-gapped in the sense that you have to have some intermediary thing kind of providing the access? So like what I've seen so far is you're either doing this as a proxy or you're running a private container registry that registry itself can access the internet via help from the admins, but the things running in Kubernetes cannot. So like the Kubernetes can talk to the private registry can talk out to the internet and go from there. So I think that kind of makes it a little easier, where we're not having to say go download these, specific containers, build a tarball, figure out how to copy them across your air gap, things like that. I suspect there's people out there that really need that very hard disconnect from the internet. But I suspect most people are just trying to provide a firewall for containers, right?
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, right. I mean, we still are a streaming service, right? So, yeah,
Sure.
That makes sense. Cool.
Yeah. That kind of reminds me of those days when I'm a Java developer, right? So we used to have like Maven libraries. And we have to stand up Nexus server to host these Maven libraries, and the container registry kind of just reminds me of that. So we can have a certified versions of things that people can download to manage the container, so nobody can grab any other rubbish container like on the internet and just have it running on the Kubernetes. I guess that's the intent. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, the container is just a packaging mechanism, right? It's like an RPM, a Debian file, or a jar, something like that.
Right. Exactly.
For places that I've seen that actually do require, and not just require, but to have air gap because they have to have air gap. Manufacturing, a lot of factories in China have no internet connection. Samsung runs most of them. Also submarines, which do run Kubernetes. They do run a lot of things, obviously air gap, because they don't have air.
Well, when they submerge from the water, they do get internet, right? So that's when they start pulling things back.
Does FedRAMP? Does anyone know about FedRAMP? Does that require some sort of
most of it does? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Physical gaps.
And
of course, there's a lot of container ships that still are running without any satellite connections.
Yeah, in those cases, then having a set of images that work is definitely something that we want to provide. Yeah.
Those are all things that I've had direct experience with customers that have that problem.
I remember talking. This is my my life before, not here, but we had we did have an encounter a submarine cases and a cruise when we were also talking to a cruise company where they're hosting Kubernetes on their ship, and it's like what Joe was saying, it was a problem, but the problem wasn't like they're completely isolated in an airtight environment, but it's when they get to shore, they need to make sure that they have everything loaded and then updated in the fastest manner, and they probably don't have good internet connection. It's not stable, so you kind of have to allow like intimate disconnections. You don't always have connections, right? So that's just something that they are kind of struggling with and trying to fix that from the Kubernetes perspective. But I think what they did is mostly they're serving like internal, like on deck services, and then like when they get on the shore, they will update their content at the time. So that's kind of what I saw, but I don't know if that's all the case.
And the fun things that they do with that data, they actually they track everybody. They figure out people's habits. They try to make sure that they have their drink ready for them when they get to the bar.
That's why
this is all the things they're doing with actual AI on the ships, on the cruise ships. It's really interesting, which is why they have all this real-time streaming.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Super cool. Yeah, so if there's no more questions, I want to ask another question about the resource management on Kubernetes. Like I mean, other services can provide like topics and users as a managed resource on top of Kubernetes. Are we going to have that?
Yes. I'm actually thinking about how I forgot to talk about that. So one of the changes we're making to the Helm operator is that we are going to allow for customers to produce resources that are going to be consumed by Redpanda. So topics, for example, is going to be one of those. And then we have others that my mind's escaping me the names of them, but we definitely are moving to that direction. We do think that there's something to be said about being able to manage these resources that Redpanda consumes directly through Kubernetes. Yes, topics, users, and ACLs. Thanks, Joe. So it's important to us. It is something that's coming up again in the V2 of the operator, and hopefully that kind of soothes some of the Kubernetes experience that customers are having trouble with. For example, running RPK through kubectl, maybe not exactly the nicest experience. So being able to, at first level, having this as a resource, exactly GitOps, having this as a resource directly is just a great user experience, and having an operator manage that for our customers is something we definitely want.
Yeah, I love that when you mention GitOps, because that's what I'm referring to, right? Because I want to make sure, like, in my environment, I would have, my topics already set up, and I can transfer this to another environment with GitOps and kind of quickly have them all up and kind of have a tracking of the changes and all that with users and topics I created. So that would be great if we can have that available as part of the, I think they're called CRDs, right? Custom resource definition.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are they've defined resources, so they become like first level resources for Kubernetes, and then these are like the things you want to process through Kubernetes. And so we will have them. You'll be able to create topics as a resource. You'll be able to create your own topics, and then Redpanda, and then our controllers will manage those for you through Redpanda. So
help me out here. Like with GitOps, I mean, there's two sets of levels of configurations and things we can do, right? The topics and the users, they're one set of GitOps that they can do. But with the new Helm and operators, is that another set of GitOps that we can set in the GitOps server, like Argo CDs, and we can just put it in there, just for it to manage all the values, or is it done differently? Like what it's going to look like in the future? I just want to know, maybe what would it look like for the new operator, right? For the new operator, it is going to be using Helm as the base, right? So I will be able to kind of configure that also in GitOps to kind of
your Redpandas will also become resources that you can go ahead and reuse again for different environments as you need them as well. Yeah.
Perfect.
Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I'm just thinking a lot here, since nobody's talking.
We're also going to change a bit of the scope of so we're creating a new resource. We're going to call that Redpanda, and then that is going to be namespace, of course. And then we're also going to change some of the behavior of the controller to be more fine-tuned towards that namespace, to kind of aid with a lot of this topic management, etc. So you'll be able to manage your topics at a namespace level. So that's kind of the approach we're taking right now for that. So you can depending on your GitOps deployment, you have different environments. Sometimes you can use the same cluster for those different environments and use different namespaces for each one. So you would be able to have your own controller for that particular environment, and you'll be able to run your own version of those resources on those environments. You can do whatever it is you need to do to test, etc. So yeah.
So it will be very similar to what we see today in the Helm Chart value YAML, right? This will be super similar to what it's trying.
It's going to be. It's not going to be similar to. It's going to be identical. So one of the things we want to do is make sure that difference is almost zero if possible. So what you see in your values files, so in other words, whatever you have experience with Helm Chart, you will have experience with the operator. So there shouldn't be any mental hurdle or jumps when thinking about the API, because the API will reflect that. And that also helps with validating, right? So if users make a mistake or there's something we heavily don't recommend you do, we will have to have those validations in place, as well as like logging those kind of situations where maybe we want a warning deployed to send to the customers before they do something. So that's kind of the reason why we want this, because we want to have as little friction from using the operator or the Helm chart as possible. And so there should be just a one-to-one identification for all users whenever using one tool versus the other. Yeah.
It's good to know. So any other questions or? Also allow for multi-tenant cluster. That's what, oh, so I missed this. Yeah, so yeah, that's great. Multi-tenancy, it's good. So any more questions that you want to know about Kubernetes or Red-Pandas or two things combined? And well, tell us a little bit about your current situation. Like, what are you using Red-Panda on Kubernetes for? Are you deploying? How many clusters do you have, and what are you using for? How are you managing your clusters and all that? Just let us know. Give us your feedback.
Yeah, does anyone want to share some of your pain points, some of the things you want to see eased? I think that'd be kind of a great thing to talk about right now. If you guys want to share some of your pain. We got a very shy crowd today.
I know. Hey, this is an office hour. It's supposed to be like a face-to-face discussion.
You know, when I was a TA in my previous life, I would say, "This is your time to basically, let me know what you don't know, so that I can help you understand things better." You know. So yeah, guys, come on. Putting you on the spot.
I can ask a question if there are no other questions. So I've been at Red-Panda for nearly 3 years now, and I wrote a Helm chart a little over 2 years ago. And what I found that when I was using something like Kind to develop the chart, I wanted to be able to connect from my local machine rather than inside the cluster. And this all comes back to the advertised addresses. But I wonder if there's any techniques, either for developing like locally but within the cluster, or being able to expose the DNS outside of the cluster without hacking on my ets hosts file and using metal LB or something like that.
I think that's a limitation with Kind. I don't think that's something you can kind of get around with necessarily. So unfortunately, like there is some documentation regarding this, and I know there's some more difficulties with Mac OS X as well. So I don't know if you develop on an OS X machine. There's some limitations there. They're kind of hard to go around, but they do give you a solution. But yeah, I think that's just a limitation that comes with Kind. I don't think there's much I can give you from other than what you already stated that you've kind of figured out on your own, unfortunately.
And you put that limit on there without hacking Etsy hosts.
Yeah, you kind of tie yourself your hands.
That's literally what I do when I need to do this.
Yeah, I've thought about using like DNS mask and then having something in the cluster that like have DNS mask forward to the cluster, and somehow I never got to figuring that out.
You could. Port forward. Actually, you could just set up a service for that matter. Problem is it's UDP and it's kind of a pain. Yeah. But I mean, theoretically, you could do a port forward to the core DNS service and point your resolve conf at it.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that. Huh. Yeah. Is there a reason why? What's your main reason for wanting to do this? Like having the network access, just being able to access the brokers directly, kind of direct RPK toward it, point RPK toward it.
Yeah, just I can run commands on my local machine, but have Red-Panda running in a local Kubernetes cluster as well. Mostly the reason for doing this was to develop the Helm chart.
Okay, to do what?
To develop the first Helm chart.
Oh, okay.
But I don't know if other people have this kind of use case. I have used Kind in the past, a long time ago. But I think everything then was kind of developed in the cluster and run on the cluster. I know there are some tools now which allow you to sort of develop locally, and it automatically deploys into the Kubernetes cluster and keeps it live running. Probably a bit more difficult with C++, but a lot of the more simpler languages to build can work that way, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say that if I were developing on Kind, I would probably deploy my stuff onto Kind. It's easier to kind of just take care of it. I'm a Java developer, so I kind of Quarkus will just automatically deploy things onto Kubernetes, and Camel does that too. So for me, it's like, just write the code and it just pushes directly with operators and all that. So
yeah, that probably makes things easier. Is there one called Telepresence or something like that? I can't remember.
No, I didn't use that one. For me, it's more like the the tooling that I have for Quarkus, and another one, which is Camel K. I'm heavy in the Camel community where they just have another operator installed which just listens to all the things that they need and then just pull down everything, and compile that container and just deploys it itself.
Lots of languages have nice tools, not so much C++.
Well, C++ is a lot more efficient, right? So it's different.
Yeah, during runtime.
All right, so I think we're at the end of the session. So cool, everybody. Thanks for coming over, and I will see you next time. And thank you.